BBC Radio Sussex.
Now, I mentioned, didn't I, about a subject that is being talked about a lot, and there's an event today that's happening to raise awareness about Lyme disease. It's being held in the House of Lords this afternoon. It's a bacterial infection that can be spread to humans by infected ticks. Now, Anna Slater from Hove suffers from Lyme disease, and as does Demetrios, Loukas, who's leader of the FIGHT LYME NOW Campaign. And both join me this morning. Very good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. We'll start off with Anna. Anna, thanks for joining us today, Anna. I mean, there'll be lots of people out there. There'll be lots of people out there that might not know much about Lyme disease and might not think it's as infectious as it can be. So can you enlighten us then and just tell us about your story first?
Well, basically, I was bitten about 4 years ago. It was when I was working on an allotment, and to get to that, you had to walk through a field with sheep in it, and I think that's how I got my bite. But I had the classic rash, a circular rash, but it wasn't painful, it wasn't itchy, so I just thought, oh, well, that's strange, maybe I've got some sort of, from a plant or something, but because it didn't hurt, I wasn't bothered about it. But then a couple of weeks later, I was visiting my doctor's surgery because I'd sprained my arm. And, it was a nurse, actually, that I was seeing. And I asked her, it was almost gone by then. It was, faded. It was just a very faded circle. I thought, well, I'd just ask her. And she said, oh, that's nothing. So that was the end of that for then. But then I started to get sort of all these different symptoms that gradually kind of crept up in me. And so I looked them up, as you do. And I kept coming up with one of the options would be Lyme disease, and this happened quite often. And in the end, I don't know why it took me so long, but I discovered the classic rash that goes with Lyme disease, and I realised that was exactly the same as the one that I had. Mm-hmm. So that was what made me think, well, gosh, maybe this is what I've got. But then along came the virus, and, it wasn't possible to go to the doctors. So I just left it, and then I eventually managed to get to the doctors. They did a test for me, but the NHS tests are not very reliable, so it came back negative. But nevertheless, they still gave me antibiotics, but they didn't really help. So I still got, and I've also got herbal medicine from Napier's in Edinburgh, which has helped a bit. But basically, I still have it, all the different symptoms that I had that have sort of built up over the years.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you were disappointed, with the tests not being reliable. What would you have liked to have happened initially there, Anna? Do you think that the test, should have come to you a lot quicker, it should have been a bit more thorough? What would you have liked to have happened?
Well, what I'd like to have happened was that the nurse that I asked in the first place would have recognised it, or at least thought, well, that looks a bit strange, we'll do a bit of investigation, instead of just saying, oh, it's nothing. Because obviously it wasn't nothing, because it was there. But she obviously didn't know. I mean, I didn't know anything about Lyme disease. Don't think very many people do.
Yeah.
So I don't think she obviously didn't know, because if she had have known, she would have recognised it. Yeah. And the test, I mean, people with Lyme disease, they send away for tests. There's all sorts of tests you can get, but they're very expensive, and I can't afford to get these tests, but they're much more specific. And there's a lot of co-infections that go along with the Lyme disease.
Yeah. I'm just going to...
I can't afford the tests.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a really good point. Actually, we'll bring that up as well about not only is it not being thorough or tested quickly enough, but actually the financial implications of that. Thanks for that for the minute, Anna. I'm just going to bring in Demetrios, Loukas, who's leader of the FIGHT LYME NOW campaign. Good morning,
Hello,
Demetrios.
Kevin.
Hiya.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having us on today. Thank you.
No, it's an absolute pleasure, Demetrios, because lots of people have been texting in already. It's one of those things, isn't it, where people hear Lyme disease, and they think, yeah, I'm not really too sure what that. It's not going to affect me. So we kind of just not absorb it in. So I think the awareness of Lyme disease is very minimum, which is why it's great to raise this awareness this afternoon at the House of Lords. Just to give us some backstory then, Demetrios, can you just tell us, because you contracted the disease back in, what was it, 2005?
Yeah, 2005.
Oh.
I was a primary school teacher in Oxfordshire, and I was bitten on a school trip to a farm. I too developed, like Hannah, the erythema migrans, the bullseye rash, the fever. But my GP didn't suspect it was Lyme, and so the infection festered, eventually attacking my heart and my brain. So I now have an arrhythmia, a brain tumour. It's been a difficult existence. But just to correct you, the actual event happened yesterday. It was yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
Yesterday
Okay.
afternoon. Yes, it was yesterday afternoon, and we managed to, I suppose, raise awareness with key people in the House of Lords. But it was clear that a bigger meeting with a large, an even larger audience is warranted, and that I'm hoping to organise for the autumn, winter this year. The key points that were raised were, for example, T-cell tests, which are being used by the NHS to detect tuberculosis and more recently coronavirus. They're needed for Lyme disease, but unfortunately, even for those of us who can afford to pay for private T-cell tests, which have a higher sensitivity, the NHS test, the ELISA, is around 60% sensitive, and so that therefore every 4 out of 10 people can potentially fall through the net, whereas the T-cell tests are around 90. So the sensitivity is much better. But they're accepted for coronavirus and tuberculosis. Why are infectious disease doctors refusing to recognize a private diagnosis using the T-cell test for Lyme disease? It's inconsistent and unfair. And look at how quickly, or rather swiftly, long COVID was recognized and publicized by the media, whereas chronic Lyme disease is still questioned.
Yeah.
That's inconsistent and unfair. So these things need to be rectified. Furthermore, rightly, as mentioned by Anna, herbal medicine has played an important role in my treatment. I've had years of antibiotics, oral, intravenous, staggered, compound. 3 years. There's only so much the human body can take. You're literally decimating your gut. Now, I've had to turn to herbal medicine with the support of a German Lyme disease doctor, our scientific lead, Dr. Armin Schwarzbach. And they've been effective in lowering the infection titers. But we pay for the NHS. We fund it. We should be able to direct it and say, we want an NHS hospital for natural medicine and holistic therapies. We want it. We pay for it. The NHS shouldn't have the right to say, oh, well, your wart is cosmetic and therefore we won't be treating that. No, we pay for that service. It's not free.
Yeah.
We pay for it. We should not have the NHS telling us that's not right for you, that's natural, that's superficial, that's cosmetic. They're dictating to us a service that we pay for. That doesn't happen in a restaurant, does it? You don't order a specific dish and then the waiter comes back and says, well, I'm afraid you can't have that. You're going to have this. Yeah. And you're paying for that dish. That doesn't happen anywhere else. And it's just unfair and wrong. And we need to correct these things. And we have the power to correct them. So I am looking forward to the next event in the House of Lords, perhaps the House of Commons. It depends on the person who's going to sponsor it. But this is the status quo. Okay,
well, first of all, thank you, Demetrios, for correcting me. And the meeting was yesterday at the House of Lords. So thank you for that.
It went well.
That's having us. Yeah, no, that's the most important thing, that it went well, and it's opened the floodgates now, hopefully, to address and raise the awareness. I'm just going to bring in Dr. Michael Wetzler, who's a GP, but also as the Fight Lyme Now campaign lead. Dr. Wetzler, are you there?
I am indeed. Hello.
Hi. Obviously, you've just been listening to Anna and to Demetrios there. There's a lot of people out there where we're saying, that the tests aren't done quick enough. The tests aren't done thoroughly enough. And why should people have to pay for expensive T-cell tests? What's the answer? Are we, is the NHS failing us?
I think the trouble is that there are, if you like, different guidelines. And there are something called the NICE guidelines, the National Institute of Clinical Excellence. And they suggest two particular tests for Lyme disease. One's called the ELISA test, one's called the immunoblot, that are not 100% accurate and have quite a high failure rate if you do have Lyme's. Now, there's another type of test called a T-cell test. These are done in Germany and in America, and sending off privately gets you a higher chance of getting your Lyme disease detected. The trouble is that that's a whole scientific debate as to the value of the T-cell tests versus the British tests. And that hasn't been resolved as yet, so it hasn't gone on to the British NICE guidelines. There is an international Lyme's Association for Disease Specialists that has a different set of guidelines, and at the moment they are not compatible. I think what Demetrios is doing by having the Fight Lyme Now campaign, by having meetings in the House of Commons and Lords, raises awareness, and hopefully it will lead to further discussion amongst scientists and specialists and bring in the T-cell type testing into the UK.
It sounds to me then the T-cell testing is a normal or a natural test that should happen from as soon as a patient goes in. It should be available, because Demetrios was saying...
It should be available at least, if not as a first line, then as a
absolutely. Second line. Yes, absolutely. I've had a message in from Mary, because Mary was saying she'd be interested to know who lobbied for this, which is, as we've just discussed with Demetrios. But also, is there an accurate test for this, which we now know is the T-cell test? Are we now saying then that if people are suspected with Lyme disease and they can't afford or can't get the T-cell test, they could go down the horrible road and the unfortunate road that Demetrios has had to go down with ongoing medical conditions because it wasn't treated early enough?
I think that is the case. Lyme disease is described as the great imitator. You can have many different symptoms, ranging from chronic fatigue to sort of muscle pains to headaches to even to heart problems, which Demetrios eventually got. So it is, syphilis used to be called the great imitator. Now Lyme's has received that honour. And the truth is we have a large incidence of chronic fatigue syndrome in this country. And it does turn out that a definitive percentage of people who have this uncaused or so not diagnosed cause of chronic fatigue may indeed have Lyme disease as well. And yes, there are treatments of antibiotics, and there are different courses of antibiotics that can be given for what they call acute and chronic Lyme disease. And then there are herbal medicines, which I use because I've been made aware of it, but on the whole, in everyday medicine, herbal medicines are not used.
Yeah, and just before we finish, excuse me, just before we finish, Dr. Wetzler, Anna mentioned there that she went to see her GP and they didn't detect the Lyme disease. Is that acceptable when you're going in and you've been bitten by you suspect something yourself?
Well, if you've been bitten by a tick, then you should certainly be investigated. I mean, if you have, the problem is you don't always have symptoms at the beginning. You don't necessarily have a rash. You don't necessarily feel ill. So it is I don't think there's a right or wrong. It is a challenge. It's a difficult situation.
Yeah. Dr. Wetzler and Demetrios and Anna, thank you so much for spending the time to chat with us this morning.
You're very welcome.
And I guess we can all agree, can't we, to take home is that we can raise awareness now.
Thank you all for your support.
The House of Lords is now aware of that, and I guess it's just building. I like the text coming in from Mary there as well. People, want to be informed about this, so at least we've started the ball rolling. So
they're welcome to follow us on Facebook, the Fight Lyme Now campaign. So they are welcome to follow us and to reach out, and I'll do my best to respond to as many people as possible. But we are planning to host another event in the House of Parliament in the autumn, winter, and Dr. Wetzler will, of course, be there along with Dr. Newton, our scientific lead, and Dr. Amishfaq, our medical lead, amongst others. So thank you so very much for supporting us and helping us raise awareness.
Well, it's great for BBC Radio Sussex and BBC Radio Surrey to help with that raise that awareness. So no, thank you, Anna, Demetrios, and Dr. Wetzler. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Thank you.
God bless you. Thank you. Bye bye.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Lots of people have been coming through on the text as well. How much is the private assessment